Not playing, said Clara, and turned her back on the small knot of children and their game of tag. She marched off in the direction of the gates at the far end of the infant playground, her hands buried deep into her pockets. It was almost empty, just a few stragglers waiting for the older boys to finish an impromptu game of football. Poppy called after her, making lobster claws with her fingers, and everybody laughed, but Clara pretended not to hear. Poppy's mother was supposed to be looking after Clara, but she was gossiping with another mother, her back to the little girl, and didn't notice her wandering off while Poppy was too busy whispering with the others to see. That was his first stroke of luck. Mrs. Foyle called them scavengers, those playground mothers who gathered in impregnable clusters at the school gates every afternoon. To Clara, they looked like birds with their bobbing heads and pink lipstick and pretty clothes. She didn't know that some birds like to pick clean the bones of other people's lives. 5 minutes earlier, she'd tugged on Poppy's mother's coat and whispered that she needed to go to the toilet. Mrs. Smith hadn't answered, but carried on talking, flapping her arms about like wings. Clara had squeezed her legs together and hopped about a bit, but now her tights were wet and chafed against her thighs when she walked. "No, Mummy, I don't like Poppy any more," she had whined to her mother that morning when Mrs. Foyle had explained who would be picking her up. "I'm sorry, my darling, but it can't be helped. You'll have a lovely time. Anyway, it's Gina's afternoon off, and I've got an appointment." Clara had sulked and cried, but it had done no good. Her mother would not be swayed. To Mrs. Foyle, perfectly coiffured hair was more essential than breathing. The wind flexed its muscles, skittering leaves across the playground. Clara was cold, and her head ached, and she wanted her mum. She patted her rucksack to make sure her purse was still there. The children were not supposed to take money into school, but Clara had slipped it into her bag after breakfast when Gina wasn't looking. She liked the sound the coins made when they clanked together. The chilly air pinched again. It made her think of her father and the way he squeezed her cheeks between his fingers, leaving them reddened and sore. Clara shivered and fumbled with the zip of her coat. Mrs. Lewis, her reception teacher, caught her eye through the staff room window and waved. She lifted a shy hand in return and shouldered her rucksack, which was almost as big as she was. The side gates stood open. Mr. Crofton, the caretaker, would lock them on his late afternoon rounds, but for now the heavy metal bars were fixed in place against the green railings, the path to freedom unchallenged. Between jackhammer thumps of her heartbeat, Clara slipped through the school gates and stood on the pavement outside. A shiver that had nothing to do with the wind tickled her insides. Quickly she glanced back. Across the concrete expanse of the playground, Poppy was playing with Sasha, and Poppy's mother was still talking and flapping. 3 more steps, and Clara would be around the corner and out of sight. The little girl grinned nervously to herself. Across the road, a man in a black pinstripe jacket unfolded his body from the car that had been parked there every afternoon for 2 weeks. He also began to walk. His strides were longer than hers, and he soon overtook Clara, but she was too intent on her own escape to notice him. A few streets on, a woman coming out of a newsagent thought it was strange to see the girl walking home by herself through the Friday afternoon dusk. She registered Clara's regulation hat, looked for an adult, and vaguely noted the man in the black pinstripe jacket. His eyes held hers, and in that frozen moment she was reminded of her family's elderly dog. He had died that summer after being eaten from the inside by maggots, an awful prolonged death by fly strike. When she had found Buddy, still alive but in shock, his eyes had been empty. As empty as this man's. A powerful sense of revulsion overcame her, and the plastic bottle of milk she was carrying, slick with condensation from the shop's fridge, began to slide from her fingers. The man looked away, and the woman remembered to tighten her grip before it hit the pavement and burst. She forgot his face almost instantly. The man turned into a shop next to the one the woman had just left. It was empty save for the shopkeeper, who was talking on the phone in Punjabi, the hard line of his jawbone holding the receiver against his shoulder while he scribbled figures on a scrap of paper. He was calculating